and welcome to this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Riley McManus. Local Métis groups had more to celebrate than usual on Indigenous Peoples Day last week with the introduction of Bill C-53. If it passes, the act would commit the federal government to recognizing Métis self-government in Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. But the controversial bill has provoked staunch criticism from First Nations in the region. Lee Noonan has more.
Bill C-53 was introduced by Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Mark Miller, and if it passes, it will commit the federal government to negotiating self-government treaties with 3 Métis organizations, including the Métis Nation of Ontario. Vice Chair Sharon Cadeau was in Red Rock to chair the MNO's Region 2 AGM.
People can't believe it. Like, we're sitting here talking, and it's like, what is self-government? What does that mean for us moving forward? It's just something that we've talked about, but now moving forward, like creating a constitution. Isn't that exciting?
Chiefs of Ontario organized a rally on Parliament Hill last week with First Nations leaders from the Northwest and across the province voicing their opposition. Nan, Matawa, and Treaty 3 have all issued statements against the bill.
We never consented to another order of government within our territory.
Although the ministry says the core self-government agreements do not deal with land or land-related rights, Cadeau does not rule out the possibility they could eventually make land claims in the region.
Well, when you think of Treaty 3, there's a half-breed adhesion. There was lands promised. That's the only treaty in all of Canada where lands were promised to the Métis, and they're unfulfilled.
Cadeau invites First Nations chiefs who are concerned to reach out to the MNO, saying they need to come together.
We don't want anything that's theirs. We really don't. There's a piece of pie there. We don't want their piece. We want our own. So Ontario is the one that needs to make the bigger piece, and we need to stop fighting.
Local Métis leadership wouldn't comment on the self-government legislation, but they did speak to some of the other items on the agenda at the AGM, including jobs and education.
Agronaut Gold, Clean Air Metals, Wasagan, Hydro One, all those companies that we have to have consulting with. We're going to set up something in Thunder Bay, and they're going to come there because a lot of people don't know there are jobs with them.
They need to be recognized more Métis culture into the schools, and we're not seeing, doesn't seem to be getting that. There's lots of culture being taught in the schools, but not Métis specific.
Other topics under discussion included finances, the environment, and some policy updates. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
One person is dead after a single vehicle crash on Highway 105 between Ear Falls and Red Lake. OPP officers were called just after 8 o'clock Tuesday evening. The lone occupant was pronounced dead at the scene. The highway was closed for several hours but reopened Wednesday morning. Officials with Wekwan Lodge, which supports First Nations people accessing healthcare in Thunder Bay, are continuing to push the federal government for help with their expansion plans. Wekwan held a fundraiser barbecue earlier this week, but funding from Ottawa is crucial if the $45 million add-on will ever be a reality. The Silos Bellos reports.
A nonprofit which provides accommodations, meals, and transportation for Indigenous clients accessing medical care in Thunder Bay continues their calls for federal support.
I don't know if the message isn't clear enough that we're in a crisis situation. I really don't know what the problem is, but we have had no response, and we've been trying for a year and a half now.
The Wekwan Lodge is looking to develop a $45 million add-on to their Balmoral Street facility and are doing what they can to raise money, including a barbecue fundraiser with vendors this week. It currently operates a 110-bed facility, serving about 400 people a day. This high demand has led the organization to reserve more than 100 rooms every night at local hotels, costing over $1 million a month. Executive Director Donna Crookmo says the high demand has forced them to make difficult decisions.
We've had an elderly person sleep on one of our sofas, and our sofas in the common rooms are narrow. It was not an ideal situation at all. We're ashamed of it, but there was nowhere to put someone. We have got to expand. As I said, we're in a crisis situation. These people deserve better.
Wekwan Lodge is looking for 35% of the $45 million as a down payment to get the project off the ground.
was a bit surprised. I checked with my department. Indeed, there was a request for a meeting that came in late this spring.
Thunder Bay Superior North MP Patty Haidu, who also serves as the Minister for Indigenous Services, says she wasn't aware of Wekwadon's call for federal support. Haidu recognizes the importance of the service that the nonprofit provides and says she's now reaching out.
Interested in hearing what we can do as a federal government to support the work of Wekwadon. And I read the article, understand the premise of the supports they provide for people who are seeking care from outside community. I've toured the facility. I think they do incredible work there, and so I'm looking forward to hearing how we can help.
Wekwan Lodge will be holding its annual barbecue in September and has extended an invite to Minister Haidu. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
An inquest into the 2016 shooting death of Daniel Lagarde at the hands of the OPP in Nipigon has been scheduled to take place in that community 1 month from now. The mandatory inquest will begin on July 31st at the Nipigon Legion Hall and is expected to last 10 days. A jury will hear from approximately 18 witnesses and may make recommendations aimed at preventing similar deaths. A 2018 investigation by the province's Special Investigations Unit found the shooting to be justified. The township of Nipigon has a full council once again, following the appointment of a second new councillor. This comes following the resignation of 2 councillors in the 6 months of their term. Lee Noonan has the story.
Nipigon Council has 5 members again following the successive resignations of former councillors John Zechner and Pierre Pelletier. Mayor Suzanne Kuko says it's great to be back to a full complement of councillors.
We're moving forward. We're very excited. It's a great group. It's a great team, and we're just super excited to move forward and upward.
The township's newest councillor, Gail Westhaver, was sworn in on June 6th. She was appointed from a pool of 5 applicants following Pelletier's resignation in April.
When I retired, I just found I had some spare time, and so I thought with my background of growing up here and my work experiences, thought it could be of help.
The former HR specialist is now the second appointee on council, joining Glenn Hart, who was appointed in March.
I'm the editor of the paper, so I have a lot of input from people, some positive, some negative, but I know what the people are thinking. So, and I just want to be able to give back in the ultimate volunteer position I see, which is town councillor, and give back to the community and help it grow.
Hart was the first runner-up for council in last October's election, making his appointment an easy choice. As for Westhaver, Kuko says it was her experience serving the community that made her the top candidate.
She's been on our Economic Development Committee. She's on our Committee of Adjustment. She has a great background in government and human resources, and we just, felt that enthusiasm from her. She had applied the time earlier when we appointed Councillor Hart, so we knew she was really interested.
The 2 new councillors could each serve more than 3 years of the 4-year municipal term. Kuko says the choice to appoint them rather than call a by-election so early in the term was made for financial reasons. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
The restricted fire zone in the Northwest region won't be lifted this long weekend, despite the rain over the past week or so. According to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the precipitation that fell in the region was not enough to significantly reduce the number of forest fires in the Northwest.
And at this time, we're still in a state of escalated fire activity with significant resources engaged in fighting those fires. So the restricted fire zone is playing an important role at the moment in reducing that number of human-caused fires on the landscape that we would otherwise be responding to.
More than a dozen new fires broke out in the Northwest last weekend. And as of Friday evening, the number of active forest fires was still sitting at 44. Although the fire hazard around most of the region is now low, Marchand says that could easily change again if more rain doesn't materialize. Meanwhile, the smoky air has been coming and going this week due to major fires in Quebec and some large ones north of Lake Nipigon.
I think that this will continue to be the case, especially as we have so much wildland fire elsewhere as well. We do have some residents of Thunder Bay maybe, directly affected by a pair of fires, north in the Wabakimi Provincial Park areas that are seeing some some fairly intense fire behavior and putting up that volume of smoke.
Marchand adds that although the fire ban doesn't include fireworks, the MNRF is asking residents to refrain from using them on the Canada Day long weekend. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization faced tough questions at a public meeting this week. We'll have that story after the break. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization hosted a public meeting at the CAM Community Center this week. But the presentation the NWMO had prepared quickly turned into a town hall-style Q&A, with the residents and nuclear waste site opponents demanding answers to their concerns. Carl Legden reports.
The NWMO had booked CAM's Community Center on the invitation of a member of the public, but opposition groups raised the alarm over what they say was a lack of public notice about a public open house. In response, the NWMO told us the request for the session did not leave them with enough time to publicize the event. Members of nuclear waste opposition groups caught wind of the event and quickly notified their list of local supporters, leading to a showing of at least 50 members of the public.
Our organization is concentrating on the hazards of transporting and burying the waste. We transported a minimum of 1,600 kilometers one way by truck and possibly by train into northwestern Ontario if the site was selected. That's an awfully long way for critically hazardous waste, like very hazardous waste, to be traveling.
The NWMO is planning to announce a preferred site for an underground nuclear waste repository in 2024, either near Ignis or in South Bruce near Lake Huron. NWMO officials emphasize their perspective that the transportation process and waste containers have undergone rigorous testing, and that a misunderstanding of the waste itself has led to misunderstandings.
The fuel that we're talking about is a solid. It's not a liquid, it's not a green goo, it is actually a solid at the end of the day.
Hayo also noted that the problem of dealing with nuclear waste is one that society as a whole inevitably has no choice but to deal with.
The problem doesn't go away just because we don't want it, right? It is down at the reactor facilities. It's there. It has to be dealt with. It's been sitting there since the early 60s, and it's time to deal with it.
A sentiment that was certainly not lost on attendee Barry Wolfram.
There's a lot of not in my backyard, but if everybody in everybody's backyard says the same thing, we don't take responsibility for the problem. Ignace people who are considering this are considering being heroes. Somebody's got to take a responsibility. They're stepping up, maybe.
The NWMO say they plan to host more public events in the future and promised to share details with the community well in advance. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
A number of grants from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund were announced on Thursday in Terrace Bay. The MPP for Thunder Bay Atikokan, Kevin Holland, visited the Oxaban Golf Club to reveal which organizations along the North Shore would be receiving Heritage Fund investments. Once again, here's Carl Langdon.
Here in Terrace Bay today to announce $3.7 million in funding through the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation for 7 projects in the area along the North Shore in Thunder Bay Superior North.
The funding is being spread among 7 communities, with Bigtigong Nishnabeg, also known as Pick River, receiving the largest share. Over $3 million will be put towards a new covered rink and outdoor event space, along with an expansion to their existing community center. The other projects are in Rossport, Scriber, Marathon, Nakina, and Terrace Bay, and aim to improve service offerings and create new jobs in those communities.
The Heritage Fund is doing its job in really investing in Northern Ontario, and I'm always happy to make these announcements, and made a few this week, but it's a real game changer for small communities like Terrace Bay, and it's really exciting for me to be able to do that.
The Oguasabon Golf Club in Terrace Bay will be receiving over $100,000 to modernize its irrigation system. We caught up with club president Bob Spadoni, who told us a little bit more about Oguasabon Golf Course.
Now that we've officially announced the grant today, which is exciting, the work is already starting, and we won't have it in place till June next year, but 90% of the groundwork on that will be done by the end of the fall. We're going to be 60 years old, this club, next year, and there's not one paid person on the grounds. We have one student we pay.
Among those proud volunteers is Mayor of Terrace Bay, Paul Malashewski, who told us about some of the improvements the club will be installing.
The system is 24 years old, and we're having some issues with it. So the plan is to put an electric pump and motor down there and upgrade some of the controls. They'll be able to start and stop the pump, set the times up and all that from home on their phone. So yeah, it'll be great, and that goes a long way to retaining our volunteer group.
The NOHFC grants are being delivered as a part of a series of new programs that seek to address labor shortages in Northern Ontario. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
2 missing boaters have been found safe in the Kenora area, nearly 48 hours after setting out on Lake of the Woods from Wajishkanigam First Nation. 2 residents of the First Nation, 22-year-old Taylor Garrow and 27-year-old Carl Everson, were believed to have left from Powwow Island around 4 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday. OPP and Treaty 3 police began searching nearby islands after Garrow and Everson did not return home as expected. Treaty 3 police announced just after 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon that the pair were located safely. No further details are available at this time. And we'll be back in just a moment with a report on the Click Cup happening this weekend in Thunder Bay. Over 500 hockey and broomball players from remote First Nations were in Thunder Bay this weekend for a fundraising tournament. The Casey Tate Memorial Click Cup Tournament helps to raise money for people who have to travel to the city for kidney dialysis treatments. Joe Sadowski reports.
So it's great to have that community support behind this, and especially in Thunder Bay.
18 hockey teams, 8 broomball teams, and over 500 players from remote First Nations around Northwest, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the United States have gathered together at the Fort William First Nation Arena for the annual Casey Tate Memorial Click Cup. The tournament started back in 2014 with just 40 people who wanted to play hockey for something to do during the summer, but after Casey Tate passed away due to kidney disease, the tournament weekend has grown into a charity for people undergoing kidney dialysis treatment.
You know, if you mention his name in any community up north, everyone knew who he was. He was everybody's friend. So we decided to host a tournament in his honor. And the next year we decided, you know what, we got to do something bigger than just having a tournament. So we decided to organize a charity where we would raise money.
This year's tournament has already raised over $35,000, and last year totaled close to $55,000. All of the money raised will help support extra costs for First Nations people traveling to Thunder Bay to receive treatment.
Because a lot of our people from up north that have to relocate to urban centers come here alone, and a lot of them don't have an income. They don't have money to live off of. So that's why we raise this money, is we provide like an emergency fund for these people to access. Like if they're short rent, if they're short groceries. Last week we just outfitted a family with a house full of furniture. We got couches, beds, everything you need in a home.
This year's organizers decided to include broomball this year as another way to get people involved. And Jamie Kiash says the sport has more benefits than just exercise for the communities and the participants.
With broomball up north, it's keeping us healthy. It gets us together and making sure that we know that we're not alone, you know, like with the youth and the suicide rates up there. I feel like broomball has helped with that significantly.
This year's tournament has a jam-packed schedule each day until Sunday at Fort William First Nation Arena. Joe Sadowski, TBT News.
The basketball court in Shoal Lake 39 Independent First Nation has gotten a major facelift in honor of a local athlete who is doing her community proud.
3, 2, 1.
Go, 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 go! Emily Mandamin is the first person from the community to earn a college basketball scholarship in the U.S. She was home to cut the ribbon on the refurbished court, the same court where she learned to play. Mandamin said she was shaking with excitement getting to play on the new surface.
I feel on top of the world right now. I feel like amazed, so grateful and blessed. I didn't think this was possible. I didn't think something like this was going to happen. And kind of seeing it is like, it's breathtaking. I don't know. I never thought something like this would be possible, but, you know, OLG made my dream come true, so.
Mandamin and the new court are sponsored by the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation. The court also features a mural by local artist Alicia Kijek. Mermen have been surfacing on lakes, rivers, and Facebook feeds in First Nations throughout the region, in a social media trend that has been spreading across the country. Participants say it's just some good fun. From the Northwest Angle to Nipigon and in many First Nations in between, men have been posing in merman costumes and sharing the photos to social media, all with the goal of getting a laugh. Bob Baxter is one of those mermen. He was visiting home in Martin Falls First Nation when relatives encouraged him to give it a shot. He borrowed a bra and a shower curtain from his sister and headed up the Albany River for a photo shoot. Baxter says humor is an important part of the culture.
You know, I like laughing, you know. Like we take life too seriously sometimes, you know. You have to have laughter, you know, at anything. As long as the laughter is not bringing somebody down, but to bring somebody up, you know, I think that's the real medicine, is bring people up. So they, you know, if somebody gets a smile of the photos that I made there, that's great, you know, I like that.
Baxter says he's honored to be the merman for Martin Falls and hopes more men will get in on the fun. Some First Nation organizations in the region have also jumped on the bandwagon, holding contests and offering prizes for the best merman photos. A second edition of Thunder Bay Climbing is out. The local climbing guidebook features photos and detailed descriptions of hundreds of climbing routes in and around Thunder Bay and Nipigon. The self-published book is a labor of love for author Eric Fishman. Fishman has spent years out climbing in the region, painstakingly documenting the placement of every anchor and bolt on more than 900 different climbs. This new edition, he says, features brand new climbing areas and a more user-friendly format.
This book is for anybody who wants to get into climbing or has some experience that wants to see all the different areas that there are and the climbs that there are. It has information about how to access the different areas, the gear that's required, the way to go up, the way to come down, descriptions of all the different climbs. So it's pretty much for anybody who's a climber. It's also for anybody who just wants to get inspired to climb or to just look at really cool pictures of this region and how magnificent it is.
Fishman does caution beginners not to climb without an experienced guide. The book is coming soon to bookstores around the Thunder Bay area or available online through Fishman's website, outdoorskillsandthrills.com. And that wraps up this week's edition of Northwest News Week. We hope to see you again next week.